Picture this. You are stranded. Your last bottle of clean water ran out 6 hours ago. Your throat is cracked and dry. In front of you, a stream, muddy, stagnant, alive with things you cannot see. Now imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out 2 small strips of metal, 1 copper, 1 zinc. You twist them together, drop them into that filthy water, and walk away. 8 hours later, that water is cleaner than what comes out of most city faucets. No filter cartridge, no battery, no electricity, just 2 metals touching, doing what the earth designed them to do. This is not a survival hack someone invented on the internet last week. The ancient Egyptians used this principle 4,000 years ago to treat battlefield wounds. Greek sailors used it to survive months at sea. The Aztecs, on the other side of the planet, with zero contact with Europe, discovered the exact same thing independently. And in the 1960s, when NASA needed to keep Apollo astronauts alive in space, their engineers looked at every cutting-edge technology available and built a device based on this same ancient chemistry. So here is the question worth asking. If 2 pieces of scrap metal can purify water this effectively, why does the global water filter industry generate $35 billion a year selling you plastic cartridges that expire every 60 days? That is what we are going to unpack today. Not conspiracy theories, just chemistry, history, and economics. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to build this system yourself. Welcome to Historia Prime. 1. The Ancient Whispers of the Earth. Filter. The year is 2400 BC, the banks of the Nile. The air is thick with dust and the smell of blood. An Egyptian field healer crouches beside an injured soldier. The wound is deep, a spear gash across the thigh. In this era, the wound itself is rarely what kills you. Infection is the real enemy, and infection begins with water. The healer reaches for a vessel, not clay, not wood, but hammered copper. He fills it with river water and sets it aside. He does not boil it. He does not add herbs. He waits. By morning, something has changed. The water is clearer. It carries a faint metallic crispness. The healer has seen this transformation hundreds of times. He does not know why it works. He only knows that soldiers whose wounds are bathed in copper-treated water survive, and those treated with plain river water often do not. This was not guesswork. The Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical documents in human history, specifically describes copper as a sterilization tool for both drinking water and wound treatment. But Egypt was only the beginning. Around 400 BC, Hippocrates, the man we call the father of modern medicine, documented copper compounds as treatment for open wounds and lung disease. The Greeks took this further than anyone expected. Their sailors faced a terrifying problem. Water stored in wooden barrels turned green and rotten within days at sea. Crews died of dysentery, not from enemy ships, but from their own water supply. Yet water stored in copper vessels stayed drinkable for weeks, even months, under the brutal Mediterranean sun. The Greeks had no concept of bacteria, no microscopes, no chemistry. But they observed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. Copper water meant survival. Wooden barrel water meant death. The Romans scaled this insight into infrastructure. Their engineers ran copper pipes through aqueduct systems, delivering noticeably safer water to public baths and homes. Roman legions carried copper vessels across Europe and North Africa, not as luxury items, but as standard military equipment. They understood, even without the science, that this metal prevented the waterborne diseases that historically killed more soldiers than swords ever did. Now, here is where the story takes an extraordinary turn. Thousands of miles away, across the Atlantic, the Aztec civilization had absolutely no contact with the Mediterranean world. Different continent, different language, different gods. Yet Aztec healers independently discovered the exact same phenomenon. They used copper-infused water as a gargle for throat infections and incorporated it into ceremonial purification rituals. In India, Ayurvedic tradition prescribed storing water in copper and brass vessels, a practice called tamra jal. This tradition is not ancient history. It is practiced today, right now, in millions of Indian households. 5 civilizations, 4 continents, thousands of years apart, all arriving at the same conclusion. This is not coincidence. This is chemistry, fundamental, universal chemistry, waiting patiently for humans to notice. 2. The accidental rediscovery. For millennia, this knowledge was common. Copper vessels were standard in kitchens, hospitals, and ships around the world. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Copper was expensive, plastic was cheap, chemical chlorine could treat water at industrial scale. The old ways were abandoned, not because they failed, but because mass production demanded uniformity and low cost. Copper pots became plastic bottles. Natural purification became chemical processing, and an ancient understanding quietly slipped out of collective memory. It resurfaced by accident in 1984. A researcher named Don Heskett was running routine water treatment experiments. At some point during his work, he dipped a brass pen into a beaker of heavily chlorinated water. Brass, if you are not familiar, is an alloy of copper and zinc. What happened next stopped him cold. As the pen contacted the water, the chlorine simply vanished. No chemicals added, no electricity applied. The physical contact between the copper-zinc alloy and the chlorinated water triggered an instantaneous reaction that neutralized the chlorine completely. Heskett spent the next 3 years studying and refining this reaction. He patented the technology under the name KDF, kinetic degradation fluxion. But to understand why this discovery matters and why the water industry has kept it at arm's length, we need to look at what actually happens at the molecular level. 3. The science of the spark. Let me make this as clear as possible, because the science is what separates this from internet folklore. When copper and zinc are placed together in water, they form something called a galvanic cell, named after the Italian scientist Luigi Galvani. Think of it as a tiny, self-powered battery. Here is what happens, step by step. The setup. Zinc is a restless metal. At the atomic level, it desperately wants to give away its electrons. Copper is the opposite, stable, receptive, willing to accept what zinc offers. When these two metals physically touch while submerged in water, zinc atoms begin releasing electrons spontaneously. These electrons flow from the zinc into the copper. The water between them acts as the bridge that completes the circuit. The result is a tiny, persistent electrical current. You will never feel it. You could not power a flashlight with it. But at the molecular scale, it is a weapon. What this current does, 3 things simultaneously. 1. It eliminates chlorine. The electrical reaction forces electrons onto molecules of free chlorine, changing their chemical structure. Toxic chlorine becomes harmless chloride, the same compound found naturally in table salt. This happens in seconds, not hours. Let that sink in. Seconds. 2. It captures heavy metals, lead, mercury, arsenic, hexavalent chromium. These dissolved poisons are drawn into the electrical field generated by the galvanic reaction. Through a process called electroplating, they are pulled out of the water and permanently bonded to the metal surface. Trapped, locked in place. 3. It destroys bacteria. This is the mechanism